The blizzard outside pounded against the windows of my parents' Evanston estate, but the cold inside felt sharper. My father, Richard, didn't just hand me the check. He pressed it into my palm with a weight that was less about help and more about pity. $10,000. He called it an emergency fund, a lifeline to save me from my supposed aimlessness. Meanwhile, across the room, my brother Nathan swirled his scotch, smirking at me like I was the one failing to face reality. They thought they were saving me from drowning, but they had no idea I was the one who owned the ocean. I could have responded, I could have shouted, but I didn't. Instead, I held the check in my hand, its thin paper cold against my skin. The blue ink, sharp and familiar like a wound that hadn't quite healed. There was a reason I didn't speak. But before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment and let me know what's the most insulting advice a family member has ever given you. Growing up in this house, I always felt like the invisible one. My family was a well-oiled machine, my father a retired executive, my mother the socialite, Nathan the visionary architect. And then there was me, the glitch in their perfect system. The one they couldn't fix, the one who didn't fit. I'd come back to this drafty Victorian house in Evanston every time, but I never quite belonged. The beige walls, the heavy furniture, the scent of pine and expensive cologne, it all felt like a performance, a carefully curated image of success. My parents wore their status like a badge of honor, and Nathan, with his perfectly tailored suits and grand ideas about reshaping the world, was their pride and joy. He was their perfect son, the one who was destined for greatness. And then there was me, the one they didn't know how to mold, how to make into something they could boast about at dinner parties, the one who never quite measured up. As I sat there watching my father's eyes linger on the check he had handed me, I felt the weight of years of subtle judgment. It wasn't just the $10,000 he gave me, though. That was the outward symbol of their pity. It was everything else. The silence, the coldness. My family had this way of treating me like an object in need of fixing a problem they didn't quite understand, but still wanted to solve. They'd see me sitting there not talking, not engaging, and they'd think I was broken. They didn't see me as a person with my own thoughts, my own life. They saw me as a failure, and in their eyes, a failure needed rescuing, not respect. I had learned to survive in that suffocating environment by freezing. I built walls around myself brick by brick until I became a ghost in their world. I stopped speaking because speaking only seemed to tighten the noose around my neck. Over the years, I became the quiet one, the one who didn't challenge their perfect image, the one who never upset the balance, but that didn't mean I didn't see what was happening. I was acutely aware of my place in this house, of how I was treated differently, how I was the one to be fixed. It was suffocating, and yet in some twisted way I had learned to accept it. I had learned that if I just stayed silent, if I just kept to myself, I could survive. But survival, I had come to realize, wasn't living. It was a trap. And no matter how many times I came back to this house, no matter how many more checks they handed me, I was still the same person they treated as invisible, as nothing. Nathan with his grand ideas and polished success, it was everything they wanted me to be. I couldn't be that no matter how hard I tried. And maybe that's why I kept coming back. I needed to know how deep their expectations ran. I needed to know if they could ever truly love me, not for what I could do, but for who I was. I didn't need their pity. I didn't need their charity. But I couldn't help but wonder, could they love Claire? Not the billionaire, not the person who had it all, but just Claire, the girl who supposedly needed help paying her rent. I wasn't sure, but I had to know. And so I waited. I waited for the moment when they would finally see me for who I was, not a failure, not a charity case, but a person with my own worth. And that moment was coming, whether they were ready for it or not. Nathan's voice was smooth, too smooth, as if he had carefully rehearsed every word. He wasn't just offering a job. He was offering me a life sentence in a place where I had no voice, no choice. You know, Claire, he began swirling his drink with that air of practiced nonchalance. I was thinking about your situation earlier before Dad gave you that check. I could feel the cold sting of his words before they even hit. My situation. His eyes never left me, studying me like I was an experiment, something to fix. Money's a band-aid, right? Doesn't solve the structural problem. He paused clearly, waiting for me to respond, to ask him for the solution, for the savior he thought I so desperately needed. I didn't. I just kept my gaze steady, though the internal storm was rising. The air in the room thickened, a quiet tension building between us. He leaned in his voice, taking on that tone, the one that never bothered to hide the disdain he felt for anyone who didn't share his vision. I was thinking, he continued, my executive assistant is completely overwhelmed right now. We've got mountains of compliance data for the Skyline project that need to be digitized. It's mindless work, honestly. Just taking numbers from old blueprints and entering them into Excel. But it needs to be done. I could bring you on as a contractor. Temporary, obviously. It's just data entry, but you're good at typing. Right. You spend all day on that laptop anyway. Might as well make yourself useful. The words landed like ice-cold water splashing across my face. Data entry. The job he was offering the founder of Nexus Logic, the woman who had coded the system, keeping the entire power grid from failing under a brutal blizzard. A data entry job. The insult was so precise, so perfectly aimed at the very core of my professional worth, that for a moment, I almost didn't know how to process it. He was offering me the kind of work that required no thought, no skill, no expertise. Just mindless inputting of numbers as if that's all I could handle. I should have been angry. I should have thrown the check in his face and told him exactly what I had built. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there, numb, silent. My fingers tightened around the check in my pocket, the sharp edges of the paper a reminder of how little they saw me. It was like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. Not with them watching. Not with their eyes scanning me, waiting for a reaction. The disbelief in me was so thick, I could almost taste it. I wasn't just shocked by Nathan's words. I was shocked by how deeply I had allowed myself to believe that they might see me differently this time. After everything I had built, everything I had accomplished, they still saw me as nothing more than a failure. To them, I was just the girl who needed help. A girl whose worth could be measured by the most trivial, mundane tasks. My professional identity, the product of years of work, had been reduced to data entry. For a moment, I thought about how easy it would be to tell him the truth. To tell him that I wasn't just Claire, the girl struggling to make rent. I wasn't just Claire, the failure. I was Claire, the woman whose work was keeping an entire country's infrastructure running. I was the architect of the digital systems that powered cities. But I didn't say anything. I stayed quiet, letting the words sink in, letting them fester. Nathan smiled at me. That patronizing grin that was always reserved for people he thought he could control. "It's a temporary gig," he said. "You know, just to keep you busy. I'm sure you'd appreciate the extra cash, and you know it might look good on your resume." He was looking at me like he had just solved my problem, like this was the best offer he could give me and I should be grateful. His words hung in the air like smoke, choking the space between us. I forced myself to speak, but only the smallest of words escaped my lips. "I'll think about it," I said, my voice a tight, controlled whisper. The lie tasted bitter, but I had to say it. I had to let them think they had control. Nathan nodded, clearly satisfied, and turned away from me to continue talking to my parents about his latest project. The weight of his words still pressed on my chest, but I didn't show it. I didn't give him the satisfaction of seeing how much he had hurt me. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken judgments. Alyssa, my sister-in-law, chimed in from the couch, her voice dripping with that corporate condescension I had grown so accustomed to. "You really should consider it, Claire," she said, taking a delicate sip of her wine. "I was looking at your LinkedIn profile the other day, and honestly, it's a ghost town. You have a 3-year gap since you left that IT job. In PR, we call that a career death sentence. Even a data entry role would show future employers you're employable." My heart constricted at the words. A career death sentence. That's how they saw me. To them, I wasn't just someone who had been underestimated, overlooked, and ignored. I was a failure in need of repair. And yet somehow I sat there silent, still absorbing the insult without flinching. It wasn't just a job offer, it was a reminder of everything I had been to them. Nothing. A hollow space they wanted to fill with their own mediocrity. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't the Claire they thought I was. I just had to make them see it. The room had been heavy with the usual tension, the kind that always seemed to hang in the air when Nathan was running the show. But then, something changed. The television, which had been looping holiday commercials on mute, flickered. The bright red and green graphics vanished, replaced by the stark, urgent blue of a Bloomberg breaking news alert. The change was so sudden, so jarring, it felt like the room had shifted under my feet. The invisible billionaire Nexus Logic founder revealed. The words flashed on the screen, bold and unyielding. The anchor's voice cut through the stillness of the room, sending a ripple of disbelief across my family. My phone buzzed in my pocket, then again, then a continuous vibration that signaled a storm I had been trying to contain. My PR team had lost the battle. The news had broken. Nathan, the first to notice, stopped mid-sentence. His glass, halfway to his mouth, hovered in the air as his eyes narrowed at the screen. Nexus Logic. He muttered the name, sounding unfamiliar and almost foreign to him. "Isn't that the supply chain AI?" My father, who had barely looked up from his scotch all evening, suddenly barked, "Turn it up." His voice was sharp, impatient. The room was silent now, all attention focused on the screen, on the words that were spinning the world on its axis. The volume rose, filling the space with the clipped, urgent voice of the news anchor. The entire room froze. Exclusive confirmation tonight regarding the mysterious leadership behind Nexus Logic, the artificial intelligence firm credited with preventing a total collapse of the North American logistics grid during this week's historic blizzard. The words, though familiar to me, felt surreal coming out of the TV. It was a punch to the gut. I had known this was coming. I had known it would only be a matter of time before the truth surfaced, but it felt different hearing it out loud. The camera shifted to a graphic showing shipping routes, stabilizing in real-time systems I had built. Shipping routes optimized by the very code I had written at my kitchen table 3 years ago. The anchor continued, but I barely heard her anymore. My father's face had drained of color. Alyssa, my sister-in-law, dropped her wine glass. The red liquid spread across the rug in a perfect silent stain, but no one moved. They were frozen. I watched their faces, knowing that they didn't yet understand what this meant. The next words from the anchor hit like a bomb. Sources close to the deal confirmed that the company is solely owned by 29-year-old Chicago native Claire Anderson, who retains 100% equity in the company, has just rejected a $1.5 billion acquisition offer from Amazon, stating that she intends to keep Nexus Logic independent to ensure its technology remains focused on critical infrastructure stability. The room went deathly quiet. My mother gasped her sharp intake of breath so audible it might as well have been a scream. My father's hand shook ever so slightly as he held his glass, his eyes still locked on the screen, not yet registering the significance of the words being spoken. And then there was Nathan standing there, his expression morphing from confusion to disbelief to something else. He wasn't just shocked. He was shaken to the core. His eyes flicked from the TV screen to me and back again, as if the two realities, the Claire he had just offered a menial job and the Claire being described on national television, couldn't possibly coexist. His world was tilting, cracking at the seams. He had no idea who I really was, and neither did the rest of them. The next line from the anchor made the room feel like it was closing in on me. "This isn't just a tech unicorn," the anchor explained. "It's a survival engine." The truth about what I had built was now clear. Without Nexus Logic's predictive rerouting, the anchor explained the Midwest would have been plunged into darkness, with power grid failures and critical shortages of medical supplies. My systems were what had kept the city alive, and the world had just learned that the person responsible was sitting in this room with them. Nathan's eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't process what he was hearing. 1.5 billion, he whispered. His voice was distant, shaky, as if the number alone had somehow shattered his understanding of reality. "Valuation is actually 4.5, I corrected him quietly, the words falling out almost effortlessly. It wasn't a boast. It was just the truth. The reality that had always been hidden beneath the surface was now exposed, and in this moment, I could feel the shift. The power had tilted. I didn't smile. I didn't even look proud. I just sat there, calmly watching the destruction of the illusion they had built. The illusion that I was a failure, a charity case. In that frozen moment, my family saw me for who I truly was. Not a problem to be fixed, but the very thing that had kept them safe. I had saved their world, and they had no idea. The silence was deafening, broken only by the howling wind outside. My father couldn't even look at me anymore. His gaze was locked on the screen, but his mind was miles away, stuck in the realization that he had been wrong about everything. And Nathan, who had once looked down on me as nothing more than a girl who needed help, stood paralyzed, his ego shattered by the truth that had just come crashing through the door. The room was still frozen, the air thick with disbelief. My father's face was a mask of confusion and regret, his hands shaking slightly as he clutched the glass, staring at the TV. My mother was silent, her lips pressed tight, as though she couldn't reconcile the image of me on the screen with the daughter she thought she knew. And then there was Nathan. I could see at the moment when the realization hit him like a freight train. His face had gone pale, his lips trembling. He was the first to speak, but the words came out more like a question than a statement. 1.5 billion. He whispered the number hanging in the air between us like a ghost. Is that true? I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch out, letting the weight of his question settle in the room. Nathan's voice cracked, but I didn't look at him. I wasn't looking for validation, not from him, not from any of them. I was done with that. The silence was mine, and I was going to fill it with the truth they had never bothered to listen to. Valuation's actually 4.5 billion, I said quietly, my voice calm and even the words cutting through the air like a blade. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even proud. It was simply a statement of fact, something I had built with my own two hands, something they had never seen because they were too busy watching me from behind a curtain of pity. My father didn't flinch. His eyes remained locked on the screen, though I could see the edges of his disappointment creeping into his features. My mother, though, looked as if she had been struck by something invisible. The reality of what they had just learned seemed to be sinking in layer by layer. They had no words. There were no apologies. Nothing that could undo the years of quiet judgment. Nothing that could change the fact that they had never seen me for who I truly was. You think I needed your check, Dad? I continued, my gaze steady, unflinching. You think I needed your charity? My father didn't respond. His lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the shame rising in his eyes, but I wasn't interested in giving him the comfort of my silence anymore. I had lived with that shame for too long, and I wasn't going to allow it to control me any longer. I let the words sit between us, heavy and undeniable. I didn't need your pity, Nathan, I said this time, turning my eyes to him. I don't need your job offer. You're not the one who gets to decide my worth. Nathan's jaw clenched. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His expression said everything. He had built a lifetime of believing that he was the one who had it all figured out. He had always believed he could define my success, my failure. But now the truth was clear and he couldn't escape it. I built Nexus Logic, I said, my voice still calm but firm. I built it from scratch. I didn't ask for your approval. I didn't need it. And I sure as hell didn't need your judgment. The words were like a punch to the gut, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My calmness was the power I had always held, quiet, unshakable, and real. The room was silent now. No one moved. No one dared to speak. My family had always seen me as the girl who couldn't keep up, the one who failed, the one who needed saving. But they were wrong. They had always been wrong. And now they saw it. They saw the woman who had taken her own path, who had forged her own future, who had done it all without them. I let the silence linger just a moment longer before I spoke again. I didn't tell you about Nexus Logic because I didn't want this. I said, my eyes steady on my father. I didn't want your fear. I didn't want your expectations. I wanted to be your daughter, not your project. But that's not who I am. My voice was even, but every word hit harder than any shout could have. My father's face twitched as if he wanted to say something, but the words never came. He couldn't say anything because he knew deep down that I was right. He had failed me, not the other way around. And Nathan, standing there, the self-proclaimed visionary, couldn't even look at me anymore. He had spent so many years underestimating me, believing I was small, that the truth about who I had become was too much for him to grasp. The family I had spent my whole life trying to please, trying to earn their love and respect, was now speechless, stunned into silence by the truth that had always been inside me. I wasn't their failure anymore. I wasn't their project. I wasn't their charity case. I was Claire Anderson, the woman who had built a billion-dollar company while they looked the other way. And as I stood there, watching them process the truth, I realized I had already won. I didn't need their approval. I had outgrown them. I was free. The cold air hit me as soon as I stepped outside, but it felt different this time. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for so long, the weight of my family's expectations, their judgments, their pity was finally gone. I could breathe. The snow was still falling, the streets buried under a thick blanket of white, but it didn't matter. I had outgrown the suffocating walls of that house, the house that had once felt like a prison. As I walked away, I realized that I was finally free. Free from the need for approval, free from the chains they had tried to wrap around me. They had always seen me as their failure, their project, their problem to fix. But I wasn't their failure. I was mine, completely, entirely mine. And that realization filled me with clarity. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. I wasn't the girl they thought they could control. I wasn't the disappointment they could fix with a check or a job offer. I was Claire Anderson, the founder of Nexus Logic, a woman who had built something real, something powerful on her own terms. The blizzard raged on around me, but I walked forward lighter than I had ever felt. The world outside might have been frozen, but I was finally unburdened. Sometimes it takes walking away from the people who raised you to truly live. And as I drove away from their house, I knew I had left behind the past that had been holding me back. What lay ahead was mine to claim. If you've ever felt like you had to prove yourself, like you were stuck in someone else's expectations, take this story to heart. Sometimes the hardest thing is letting go. But when you do, the freedom you find is worth it. If you want to hear more stories of transformation, of breaking free, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll be back with more powerful stories of personal growth and the strength to outgrow what holds us back.